So last week on this supplement series, we discussed all things whey protein, protein bars, sweeteners, all sorts of things. Today's we're going to cover the workout window. So we're going to kick it off by talking pre-workouts and whether they work, what they do, what's best to take pre-workout, and all things here. It's probably the most marketed supplement. Well, anything around the workout window is extremely marketable, but pre-workout's been shown to have superhuman strength, skin busting pumps, and everything else that you can possibly think of. So I think we've all taken a pre-workout at some point. It's probably when you're in the early days of NO Explode, Jack 3D, and all those interesting products. But what's the take on pre-workout now? Who takes it out? Do any of you two take it?
I take this really crazy pre-workout called coffee. So I time it. I time it 30 minutes before I start training. Normally in the form of black Americano, and I find performance is always increased afterwards. But no, I think, as we'll probably come on to, I think a lot of pre-workouts, the main ingredient or the main thing that people are looking for them often is the caffeine hit. And it's, caffeine in a coffee is the only difference between that and in a pre-workout is just going to be potentially the dosage. So for me, I just go with the coffee.
Yep. Yeah. I also do a coffee, and I also do a little bit of a pre-workout too, but not because of any properties in that pre-workout that's going to make me perform better besides the caffeine, because caffeine is pretty much the only ingredient that's going to do anything for the energy levels during a session. But personally, I just like the sweet taste. I like to have something in my mouth that is sweet before I start training, and research has shown that even just mouth rinsing with something sweet can give you a bit of a performance boost, as our mouth does have receptors for glucose and all that sort of stuff, meaning that the brain thinks that there is some energy coming in, which is really cool, and you get like a little kick. But whether that's true or not, I find I get a nice little boost from it. And I also, because I do my cardio fasted, not because it's magic for fat loss, only because I like doing it fasted, it also can potentially suppress my appetite a little bit as I'm doing my cardio first thing in the morning. But that is to the extent of which of a pre-workout I will take. I don't really take it for my gymnastics sort of training, because I don't want to be completely revved up doing that sort of thing. It's actually very, very counterproductive. And other than that, that's the only time I would really take any pre-workout, but not because of any magic, only because it gives me a nice caffeine boost along with a nice sweet flavor. That's it.
I never really taken many pre-workouts, but I remember when I was personal training, all the trainers around me, there was so many pre-workouts in the cupboard, and I'm sure you guys have all experiences like the trainers cupboard was just full of like different pre-workouts, and every time the workout came around, it's like everyone's borrowing each other's pre-workouts, like scooping up, seeing how many they can take, because we're all fried, right, from lack of sleep, and it's just massive caffeine hits more than anything. But especially when you like add in some like niacin or some of those sorts of compounds, these people are like getting red-headed and B-alanine, like they're just off their gills on caffeine more than anything. I think sometimes if you go over the top with pre-workouts, you can actually lose the ability to execute your training properly, because you're so amped that you're not connected to your muscle and you're not connected to your body. You're just in and out, or you're just having an out-of-body experience of just so much caffeine hit. Because in a coffee, I don't know what the milligrams in caffeine you get in there, because it depends on the hit, but you're not probably going to get anything like 200 milligrams, which you'd get in a hit of pre-workout potentially, right?
No, you need like a triple espresso to get that.
Exactly. So when you suddenly start taking 200 milligram doses of caffeine, you're going to be feeling that, and that's going to really kick in. And I think outside of a potentially hard dieting phase, I don't really use any, and I think it's just good for general psyche and general recovery not to abuse pre-workouts.
The recovery demand is going to be way higher if you are in that just ultra kind of like hyped up state, for sure. I know I've had a few where I've just like overdone it, whether it's been like, I've done it with just too many coffees for a session, but also like a few times I've used pre-workout. That's a big reason why I don't really use it much now. I just had a few not great experiences. I just like, when you feel like you're sweating, but you feel really cold, and then like sometimes I get like the shakes as well, or you just feel a bit nauseous. Like that's the last thing you want when you're just about to go in for a hard set. So I like, maybe my caffeine tolerance is just low, but I much prefer just playing on the safe side. And another thing is, sorry, you go.
I was gonna say, I think that's meth. I think you have
Yeah. Yeah, the guy who slept outside the gym gave it to me, so I just assumed it was.
Yeah, it's really risky business in terms of recovery, but also the people that take pre-workouts the most are typically the ones that are generally most tired and really stressed anyway. So they're super stressed, they're super tired, they're in sleep there, and now they're just slamming their body with more and more stimulants. And when you take it, when you put it in that perspective, it's potentially not. It's going to be more counterproductive to you in the long term because you're just eating into those recovery demands, and that whole notion of fatigue mass fitness just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you just eating yourself into a bigger and bigger hole. So that is something to consider, that if you are listening and you take pre-workouts because you're tired and you want to boost before training, it might actually be doing you more harm than good.
Yeah. I think a good analogy I heard once was with things like caffeine or even drugs. It's like with caffeine, you're taking away energy from another part of the day to fuel that sort of hour or two now. So that's where people get that big crash later on, right? Because it's not real energy. It's just you're using that caffeine to just power through a workout. But then, as we were saying earlier, that recovery costs for later on because you're using energy that you don't technically have. You're just sort of robbing that energy from a later part of the day, so you can perform now, but then be completely destroyed afterwards. Which it's not a good habit or cycle to get into for sure.
And people fall into this trap where their new baseline becomes a certain amount of caffeine. And that's a really boring place where you start the day and you feel you're like subpar. Like if we had a graph here, you're subpar, and then you need X amount of caffeine just to normalize yourself.
Yeah.
And that's where people fall into that cycle of caffeine reliance and addiction. I don't know how much coffee you guys have, but I keep my caffeinated one to once a day, and just the first drink in the morning, and after that I won't have any extra caffeine. Because
I remember
sleep, but it's also this that reliance that quickly builds up as well. It happens before you know it, right?
Yeah, I remember a few years ago where I was working on the gym floor doing the standard PT days, right? And one day I decided to go, I'm just going to detox from coffee completely just to see what happens. And at this time, I didn't realize how much I was taking, but I stopped taking coffee for one day. I ended up doing it for 3 weeks total, which is pretty good. But for the first couple of days, I yacked on day 2. By day 1, I had just monstrous headaches. I could barely train in the gym. Like I literally could not even be like, what am I doing here? Why am I lifting this weight and putting it up? Why am I lifting it up, putting it down? What the hell is going on here? Like it was like complete withdrawal for the first couple of days. It was crazy. And ever since then, so I went 3 weeks with no coffee. And then after that, I literally, I try to cap my limit at about 200 milligrams a day max. And that's coming from all sources, which includes like, diet sodas, coffee, etc. And I'll have 2 coffees in the morning, but both are like single shot. And then if I do want something coffee flavored later on, it would be decaf from 11 a.m. onwards. So because you still get some good health benefits from decaf as well. But coffee is still actually quite healthy, which is great. It's just the caffeine content is something to be concerned about, but you can still get the health benefits from decaf. So that's what I do now.
Yeah, I do like a good decaf after. I think a lot of people struggle with caffeine reliance and caffeine overconsumption. And I think there's 2 ways to do it. You can either taper it down, but I think for most people, cold turkey does work well. Just the cold turkey and then reintroduce. I find the slowly cutting back, I don't know. I personally haven't had much success with it. When I have found that, like especially after after dieting periods, I use a lot of caffeine when I'm dieting. I'll just go cold turkey on the next day. And I think, you do have those potentially extreme higher hungers. But for me, it's like, I need to give my body a break before I reintroduce it. But I guess it's whatever works for you. If you want to do the tapering way, if you want to do it cold turkey, but I think cold turkey does have a lot of benefit.
Yeah. I think when you're trying to break a habit, just having it black and white, excuse the pun with coffee, is useful, because I think it's like you said, once you finish a diet, if you just know, right, I'm either having none or I'm going back to my 1 a day, it's just clear, the rules around it. Whereas I think if you're trying to pull it back a bit here. It becomes a bit grey area, and I think especially if your body's wanting it, it can creep back in, and you don't really end up really removing it as well as you want.
You just got to accept the potential cravings, potential headaches, potential downsides that come with any breaking of an addiction.
I was gonna say, if you're gonna do it, I would do it at like the end of the week where you got a couple of days like off, so you don't have to do anything like very mindful or something that's requires a lot of brain power, because depending on how much caffeine you're having per day, that can actually hit you quite hard. So people underestimate it. People think it's just caffeine withdrawals. Haha, that's funny. But I had some serious withdrawals. Like that was a horrible couple of days. Like horrible. Never had that before. Sleeping like throughout the day, yakking, headaches. I was like, what the hell? I'm never sick, Yeah,
it's funny. As a personal trainer, I never actually drank coffee. It was only when I went online I started drinking coffee, most personal trainers pick it up from the gym floor because it's such a sleep deprived.
Clients.
Well, clients bring coffee to the session.
Yeah. There's that. But there's also because every trainer's on slightly different schedule. So if all the trainers in the gym are working, normally someone will have a half-hour break between clients or something. So it's always I'll just do a coffee run. And then it's even if half the trainers do it, that's 5 coffees you've just nailed in first half of the day, isn't it?
Bonding time.
Yeah. I think working in any high pressure job or in the city, there's a massive, there's a client of ours at the moment who's, he's used to having 10 coffees a day. And finally got him to just go cold turkey on it, and he's now 2-3 weeks in, and he's still he's only just now recovering from all the side effects and all the aftermath of letting go of such a coffee addiction. But it's a very real thing, and people don't consider it because coffee is such a accepted part of society, and there's a lot of health benefits to it. But it's the caffeine in there, that dosage would probably be illegal if it was.
That's what I mean. Why isn't it, right? Why isn't caffeine or alcohol illegal, but other substances are? That's probably not a topic for today, but it's fascinating, right? Coffee is super addictive, and you get the same withdrawals. Alcohol is the leading cause of domestic violence and even potential death from the last thing that I've read. It actually trumps heroin overdoses and cocaine overdoses, etc., which is pretty scary, Yet it's still legal. But anywho.
That's potentially probably when it arrived into society, and it's been here for so long, it's just become an accepted part of it.
Yeah,
as
I'm
opposed
not too
to.
sure.
But then I don't know. There could be some political
alcohol
element
makes
to it.
the government a lot of money as well. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. There's a political element to it.
Yeah.
It's like in California, they've legalized marijuana in California and in a lot of other states in USA. But their sales tax on it is 30, I think it's 30% or something crazy. So they're making a lot of money out of that now. And I'm sure if they did the same thing across the world, they'd apply the same sort of taxes.
Yeah. Well, I know they're starting to use MDMA and ketamine for post-traumatic stress disorder and other psychiatry issues. So that may become legal too. So
in the US or in Australia?
I think definitely in Australia. Definitely just in some places in the US, yeah.
Yeah. Same thoughts with psilocybin as well. In certain parts of America, treating depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is probably a different rabbit hole to go down.
Don't take drugs for pre-workout.
Yeah, I think that's the main consensus is don't take drugs pre-workout, and if you're going to workouts too amped, you need to calm it down.
Yeah.
Go on.
Also, I was just going to say, I think as well as caffeine, some of the pre-workouts will have kind of referred to as pump products. So things put into them to help you get a better pump, which basically is just normally built around helping your blood vessels dilate, so open up just so you can get more blood flow into the muscles. But if you do go crazy on the caffeine and you overdo the caffeine, it then becomes a vasoconstrictor, so it makes your blood vessels tighten up more, so it can actually have the opposite effect. And if you're really caning the caffeine, then you may not even be able to get a pump in your sessions. Yeah,
and on the pump itself, I think those sorts of products, my experience, will only really work if you're lean. I have not really seen increased pump levels if you've just got too much body fat. I might be.
Yeah. You know what else works? Is having a bit of carbs and you're lean. That also helps.
Yeah.
Hydration is probably the biggest factor. Most people listening to this just need to worry about drinking enough water and adding a bit of salt.
Yeah. If you're healthy, then getting a pump shouldn't be an issue anyway.
I think salt pre-workout. That's another very overlooked. Many people that I'm working with or worked with in the past are still avoiding salt like it's the plague. You know.
Yeah, salt is a staple in my intra-workout concoction, which segues nicely into going into the intra-workout portion of the workout of the day. We've done pre-workout, and the bottom line being, probably need to question if you're taking it or not. Just on that pre-workout, a sensible answer would be go and look at your logbook before you train and try and beat that. That should amp you up enough.
Yeah.
And you should be anxious to do the workout you're doing because it's going to scare you into progression. That should give you enough adrenaline and drive to want to do it better. So there's a sensible answer to a pre-workout. But like Ivan said, most people just want that sweetness, which probably brings us into the intra-workout period, which again has been marketed as, you don't want to break down any muscle. You want to stay anabolic and in muscle building mode all throughout your training. You want to increase your drive throughout training. So, BCAAs, EAAs, all sorts of products have been brought to the market to help us realize this. So again, who's taking them out of us three? Who takes any BCAAs or EAAs?
Currently, I don't take anything. I take I have some electrolytes that I'll have like and then maybe if I haven't finished them, continue drinking them during the beginning of the session. Apart from that, I'm just on the water.
Yep, my pre-workout accidentally has some BCAAs or EAAs in them, so I'm not intentionally trying to take them. I just like the flavor of this specific pre-workout. So that's the only EAAs.
Yeah, I'd say BCAAs, and I think it's all, we were talking about it off air just before, is that a lot of it's placebo based, in that there's definitely a placebo effect of when I'm taking BCAAs, I'm drinking more water because it tastes so good. When I add the salt in as well, that even tastes even better. So I'm drinking even more water, and there's probably a sweetness element to it, which makes me think I'm drinking BCAAs, so I should probably train hard. I don't want to waste these amino acids. Yeah. So I think the placebo effect is really strong with supplements, but especially with these sorts of things, because you just start doing other things probably a little bit better.
Yeah. And I think in that situation, it's worth it. If you know, like if we know, we can talk about science all day long and be like, well, if you take EAAs and BCAAs, you're not actually getting all the amino acids, so you're not really going to get an MPS spike. Technically, that may be true, but if having those amino acids fasted, it allows you to train harder and give your session the best effort you can, then buy those EAAs and BCAAs and enjoy them. Just understand that they probably aren't giving you the benefit you think they are, but they are serving you in a different way, So I think even if something is a placebo, I say if it doesn't do you any harm, who cares? Use it. Use it if you like it and it works for you.
Yeah, so long as you're not spending £1,000 a month on different supplements, all because it's a placebo just to get you to stay in shape.
Correct. That's it.
So set yourself a budget and then work accordingly. Because that's the thing. Like we've got to be careful with that principle, because then you can use it with everything, and you just end up taking all these pills and potions, which
that's true.
It's like another way of hacking the game, isn't it? So you should none of them should become a crutch.
Balance. Is the cost worth whatever this thing is claiming? And I think that's where a lot of supplements get overblown. I know we are talking about intra stuff now, and this is when people are spending hundreds of dollars for sugar to have during their workouts. Literally spending crazy amounts of money to sip on sugar. That is, it's a bit faster absorbed though, right? That's the kicker.
Yeah, it's pre-broken down, so it should be it's worth £60 for 100 grams. Now, even if I think about my BCA usage, nowadays I only use like half to 3/4 of a scoop, and that's probably like 6 to 8 grams of BCAAs, which does nothing. It's enough to give me the.
It flavors the water, doesn't it?
Yeah, it flavors the water. But that's a massive thing. Like water, if you drink during training, if you're not like in a hot environment, sometimes you won't drink as much as you should. So a good trick to stay hydrated is just add a bit of BCAAs in.
Drink flavored water. Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think having just going back to that placebo just quickly is just like I get that to a point with the coffee. Obviously, there is real benefit from caffeine, but if I only have one coffee a day, so once I've had it, as I'm like then starting to get ready for the session, I'm like, right, like that was your coffee today. Like, don't. This is like it's going to be hitting you like now. Like, don't waste it. Do you know what I mean? So I think if that's the kind of mindset you have with your BCAAs as well, if it makes you kind of make the session count, then yeah, I don't think there's necessarily an issue. But it's just being aware of what it is. Because say you run out or you're on holiday, you don't bring your BCAAs with you and you do a session or something, you're still going to go hard in the session. You're not going to go sack it off because, oh, I haven't got my 8 grams of BCAAs with me. You know what I mean?
I remember I used to be a big fan of Yihimbine, and I'm not against it now, but I think a lot of it also, I'm just thinking wrong reflection of it. I think a lot of it, there is definitely a placebo effect to it in that you're taking your Yihimbine with caffeine. So you naturally just go harder and you make those cardio sessions really, really count.
And you feel it.
And you feel it. How much science there is to it, and I don't know. Like I don't know. But
Zero.
There's probably a level of placebo to that definitely got me through a couple of cardio sessions and definitely taken a lot of other people through it as well. Especially when you introduce the half dose in the afternoon. It does help with your hunger, to be fair. Like it does really cap your hunger.
I'll say that's the biggest benefit.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the biggest benefit. You don't feel hungry at all when you're on the Himbine. Like you can be grinding hard on calories, but you take that second afternoon dose to the Himbine, like it's gone.
Then even then, right? If you took something that wasn't your Himbine, but you thought it was, it may even still have that effect because like placebo is so strong, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Placebo is one of the biggest things with what we do when it comes to training, especially, and just hunger management and these sorts of things.
I heard something recently where a guy was, I think he was hypnotized to basically think that a pen was like a really hot iron rod. And so he was like, really scared of it or whatever. The scientist or whoever was doing it touched him with the pen, obviously literally just a normal biro, and his skin afterwards blistered as if he'd been burnt.
Yeah.
Which just shows how deep the placebo is, because it's like, that's not even like the physical reaction. It's like his body was expecting that. His body responded how it was expected to, how it should have. Like, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. There's another story I heard with, it's nothing to do with like nutrition, but it's more to do with, so I think this guy was having like knee issues for ages, for years or what have you. And they did a sham knee operation, meaning that they put him under, they set up everything around it, but they never actually cut into his knee. You know what I mean? So he thought this entire time that they did like a knee surgery for him. They gave him like a little scar or whatever just to show that there was something, but they never actually dug into his knee or did anything. And he woke up out of the surgery a couple of weeks later, he was fine. Like, he was just like, yeah, it worked. And that's crazy. What do you mean? And they reckon it was because, well, yeah, his brain has now spent this much money on this surgery. He knows this is the best surgeon. He knows that this works. Excellent. I know my knee's going to be better after this. Wow. That's crazy.
That kind of reinforces that psychosomatic thing we were discussing a couple of weeks ago around the psychosomatics around injuries, but it probably applies to this.
Yeah.
I mean, even that cycling study, the one you always refer to around the sweetness, put the sweet in your mouth. That cycling study, that's a clear example of it, isn't it? Because I think wasn't the study that they had one person actually taking sweetness and one was just flavored sweetness? Is there something around that?
It was just like, I think it was people that were just mouth rinsing, so they weren't even swallowing it.
Okay, yeah, that's it. Yeah,
it was just rinsing something that was sweet, and they were getting a performance benefit. And as I mentioned earlier, it has something to do with like the glucose receptors in our mouth that will send a message to the brain, and then some magic happens, and then we train harder.
Yeah, the power of the brain, eh? Power of the brain.
That's where just being bought in, excited by the process is so important, because if you've had your BCAAs and you're like, oh yes, I had them, let's smash the session. Just the same way, like I used to sometimes like buy like a Poliquin program. I'd be so pumped to start it. when I look at it on paper now, it was no better than whatever other program I was doing before, because I was so excited about it. I was like, oh yes, Charles Poliquin said this is going to be the best program. I trained my ass off in the sessions. I was making sure I was getting an early night the night before. Like everything else just comes into line. So then the sessions do actually go well. And it's not because there's anything magic there. It's just because you've just created that buy-in and that excitement. Which
belief.
That belief. And like, if you go into your session feeling more excited and more bought in because you've got your BCAAs in your hand, then your results will probably be better.
Yeah. And if that becomes part of like your ritual, that becomes part of your like pre-training routine, or have my BCAAs, that sweet taste hits your mouth. You're like, yeah, I'm ready. 20 minutes. Boom. You know, it's like a precursor, right? BCAAs or whatever. We all have our routines before we train. We all do it. We all have that sort of get into the zone routine, whatever that means for any of us. We all do it, even when it comes to training or when it comes to work, when it comes to anything that we do. Yeah. And it's making those associations.
It's like I have an association with one song that I think only this song I can play when I'm writing. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to write good stuff.
That's crazy.
And it's just that belief that I have, like that's the song that I have to play.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything wrong with having it, but as long as you're aware enough that it's not that, and so it's like, you know, you having your BCAAs, if that helps you, then brilliant. But like, it's knowing that when you run out, it's not the end of the world, and you can still push hard. And it also then just allows you to evaluate, is the price of them worth what it's given me? Because it's not, you know what I mean? Like once you get past that.
I mean, one thing I should caveat, I don't know if I've said it, but you guys know, is I train fasted. So because of that, I don't like that. You know that taste in your mouth when you're fasted, and when you go and train, it just feels a bit weird. So I like to use the sweeter taste of the BCAAs and that different taste to just I don't even know the answer. It's just a placebo around it. But you guys get what I mean.
Yeah, that's interesting that you train. Why do you still decide to train fasted? It's just out of curiosity.
Routine, really.
Yeah.
So I just train before breakfast.
Yeah.
So I'll work and then I'll train and then I'll eat breakfast.
Yeah. Makes that breakfast so
yeah, but then some like I'm not tied to it. So some days it might happen at 2:00. If I train later in the day, then I'll have just trained in between breakfast and my afternoon meal. Then I won't use BCAAs. So I'm not tied to it.
Do you notice a difference in performance when you train the other way?
I don't really think so. No.
Yeah.
I used to be, I'm less tied to that than I used to be. I used to be a lot tied to like, if I don't train at this time, it's not going to happen. But now if I train later on in the day, it's not much of an issue.
No.
That's a good point, actually. Sorry, just going back to the caffeine stuff, is like, you know, if you want caffeine before your workout, especially if you're having like a stronger pre-workout, if you are training in the evening, you need to take that into consideration, because caffeine does have quite a long half-life. And so if you're finishing work, training at like 7 p.m., if you're nailing a load of caffeine before then, your caffeine levels in your blood are still going to be really high at say 9, 10 at night when you're potentially trying to go to bed. So that's definitely a consideration you should take around pre-workouts for sure. Yeah, especially if you're sensitive to caffeine. And you know, I would say, Ed, you sound like you could be quite sensitive to caffeine. Have you ever had coffee a little bit too late in the day and it's sort of just rattled you? Yeah. I've for years now, I pushed it, like started at any time, then I brought it back to 3 p.m, then to 1. Now I do like midday is my cutoff. Like normally if I'm on my normal routine, I have my coffee at like 9:30 and then train at 10. So I don't really ever experience it now, but I know if I go out for dinner, you know, like, you know, it's so weird, right? You never would have a coffee at like 9 at night, but if you're in a restaurant, you finish your meal and then like, it's just the norm to have a coffee, isn't it? So it's like, why would you do that? But like, if I do that, then like, sometimes it will hurt me. Fuck that. Oh, sorry.
Go on, Ivan. We didn't hear you.
Oh, I was going to say, I've seen that too, because my parents, they're Croatian. Every time I go out for dinner with them and whatnot, and I'll just hang out with them, they'll always have a coffee after dinner. Always. Like 8:00, 9:00, just sit there, have a coffee. And my dad will like fall asleep an hour later.
my grandma says she can't get to sleep without having Indian tea. And the Indian tea is it's got caffeine in it. She's like, I can't get to sleep without it.
I think I might be the old placebo again.
Yeah, it always baffles me where they're like, they're after the meal, they're like, hey, you want a coffee? I'm thinking, I'm ready to go to sleep. Not ready to start my day again.
Yeah. Put my light blockers on now.
Yeah.
Light blockers on while you just smashing a big double espresso.
I've got
the glasses.
I noticed you don't really wear your light blockers anymore. I noticed you don't really wear your
these bad boys.
Yeah. They're quite trendy ones.
Yeah, these are cool, actually. I like them.
Yeah, for those listening on the podcast, go check out the YouTube for if you want to see Ivan's glasses.
Yeah.
So
Blue box.
Let's so we discussed pre-workout, intra-workout, and one other supplement which we'll finish up on, which is typically taken around the workout period for convenience, is creatine monohydrate. So creatine is one of the most scientifically backed supplements of all time. So it's been proven to work. So let's dive into all things creatine. Do you guys take it? Should you take it? And how does it work?
Yeah, something I take daily. It's like you said, it's so backed by science. It's relatively very cheap, especially when you compare it to a lot of other supplements. And the ease of taking it as well is so easy. I just mix it with my whey protein. I have unflavored creatine, and so you don't even know you're having it. Likewise, if you're not having that, you can even get it in tablet form. So it's convenient, research backed, and cheap. So for me, I don't see the barriers to taking it so low. I don't see why everyone wouldn't want to take it.
Yeah, and the way it works simply is just it gives you more power output and more sort of strength endurance, meaning that you can just give a little bit more to each of your sessions, especially your more explosive lifts or your lifts that require the most oomph, so to speak. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. And how much of a boost is it going to give you? It's not going to be like steroids or what have you, but it definitely is, as a natural athlete or someone wanting to maximize their muscle building efforts, it is definitely a supplement worth having in your arsenal. Also because it is super cheap too. It's still really, really cheap. And don't fall for like the matrixes, or don't fall for the super expensive creatine. All you need to understand is that if you can get your hands on some pure creatine monohydrate, that is going to be more than enough for you to obviously get the most out of your sessions. There are general recommendations that go off body weight if you want to be super specific, but just for ease, I would start at between 4 to 5 grams per day, and then you can, if you take that every day, your cells should be sort of saturated by the end of the week, and that will also, within that week, you may see some increases on the scale weight, which is, again, yes, it's water retention, but it's not water retention the way that you think it is. It's water retention in your muscle cells, which is a good thing. You want the water and carbohydrates and creatine to be in your muscle cells, which is not going to contribute to you looking watery or soft, even if your scale weight does increase. It's not something to freak out about. It's just more fluid in your muscles, which is a good thing. So
yeah, and you don't need to worry about loading all the crazy loading cycles and protocols that people have. That's 30 grams for five days. I mean, I've done all of that, and actually, this probably explains why. Because we spoke off air around potentially using it with carbs, and I remember one of my early cycles. I used to never have. This is probably where it came from. I used to never have creatine without having a tablespoon of honey. I used to have honey, and I used to mix it into water. So I used to mix honey water, and then I used to have my creatine inside of that, because I was thinking that this is the best way to load it.
Yeah, it may be though, because some of the loading strategies are quite high dosages, aren't they? And so maybe it was just a way of just getting it down without, if you're having it on its own, it tastes like chalk, really, doesn't it? So maybe it was just a way to get it down.
Either way, I did it.
Yeah. I think especially with the amount you have to load in those first few days, if you do it like that, I think most people spend more time on the toilet than actually able to train, don't they? But I think it's, researchers show that all you want to do is just get your levels in your body up to a certain amount. And so if you just do it with, say, 5 grams a day, it may take slightly longer to hit those levels that you want, but you get to the same level and there's no need to go crazy with that loading over the first 3-5 days or whatever it is.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I used to never drink much water until I got to about the age of maybe 18. And that's when I first tried creatine. And I think the other thing that they used to say that, you know, when you take creatine, you need to drink a lot of water. And because of that got me drinking 3 liters a day. It was nothing else worked. Like until I started drinking creatine, like literally I'd go to school and I'd take a 500 milliliter water with me, and I'd get back home and it wasn't even touched. I wouldn't drink any water. When I started creatine, I was literally drinking like 500 milliliters every other hour, and I was just pissing all day long.
You found your why behind your why.
Yeah. So, yeah, creatine brings back a lot of fun memories.
I think that's the level up from, you know, like we said in the last one, like we start taking protein and was like, oh, you're getting serious now. And then like a few months later, it's like, oh, he's on the creatine as well now. Like that's like the next level up of.
Well, for a natural, it's as good as it's going to get, right?
Yeah, you peak your supplement intake right there. But yeah, no, I think it's also worth just knowing that as well as performance benefits, there's been some good evidence to show that cognitive function can be improved with it as well. And although I'm not up to date with the latest research on it, last time I checked, there was some emerging stuff around long-term health and avoiding degenerative disease, especially in the brain, things like Alzheimer's and things like that, with it being linked to potentially. So although it may not be 100% confirmed, I think there's just more benefit potentially from taking it as well.
Yeah.
That's a wrap on creatine. Basic is, the bottom line is take 5 grams a day and enjoy all the benefits. Cheap, easy, and go on.
That's it. It's perfect.
Cheap, easy, and add it into, the easiest way to do it is actually just add it into your shake. Well, if you're going to take a shake or any time you're taking protein powder, just add it in. It's probably the easiest way to remember. And that's a wrap.